This video is to demonstrate a new feature in Ideas Accounts Payable that allows you to make partial invoice payments in multiple currencies. As an overview, this presentation will demo the new feature that allows partial payments to be made against an invoice in two different currencies. The demo will cover both automated check and manual check processing. A USD invoice for $1,000 is to be paid in dinars at a 1.5 exchange rate, and that will be used for both processes. A partial payment will be made in dinar, and the balance will be made in USD. So we've defined an invoice. As you can see that the currency at the top of the invoice entry screen is in USD. So this is a USD invoice. The amount is $1,000. And we have designated that this should be paid in dinars with an exchange rate of 1.5 for a converted amount of $1,500. So the process begins with the generate cash requirements process. USD is entered for the currency and DNR is entered for the payment currency. Because our invoice was defined that way, it's selected with this information in the cash requirements screen. And actually two invoices were selected by cash requirements, both of them $1,000. And both of them are being paid at 1.5%, or a rate of 1.5 for a total payment of $3,000 in Algerian dinars. In the Edit Cash Requirements screen, we've added a new payment currency operator and rate field to the grid. The two invoices selected for payment are displayed in the grid. You can see that the rate of 1.5 is indicated for both invoices. And at the bottom of the screen, you can see that the total vendor amount is $2,000 in US and $3,000 in dinars. And this matches with our generate cash requirements totals. Also in Edit Cash Requirements, a partial payment is to be made on invoice 112921 of $250. The pay amount in the payment currency is automatically calculated to $375, which is $250 times 1.5. You will notice that the payment currency is at a 0 decimal precision, so there's no decimal places. For the dinar payments. That is because the dinar currency is defined in this system as 0 precision and will not display any decimal points for those amounts. So if desired, the exchange rate can be changed and the payment currency amount is automatically recalculated. As an example, we've changed the rate to 1.25 for invoice 112921. Once we've done that, the payment currency amount is automatically recalculated to 313 dinars, which is 250 times 1.25 now. So this demonstrates how the exchange rate can be changed at the point of payment to correct an exchange fluctuation that may have happened between the input of the invoice and the payment of the invoice, or at the instruction of the vendor. The totals are then summed with the new exchange rates. In our example, we had one invoice of $1,000 paid with a rate of 1.5. So the full amount was paid, resulting in $1,500 as the dinars payment. And a partially paid invoice of $250 was paid with a rate of 1.25 instead of the 1.5 rate, for a total of 313 dinars. And the resulting total payment amount in the payment currency is 1,813 dinars. So now to print the checks, the auto check screen processing basically remains the same. But one note is that the available bank code list is dependent on the payment currency field. So because payment currency defined is Algerian dinars, then the bank code options would only display bank codes that are related to Algerian dinar accounts. When the check is printed, you can see that the check amount is for $1,813 in dinars. In this particular check format, the check stub shows the amounts paid against the invoices in USD. Point of note is that the invoice is always controlled in the invoice currency within the application, regardless of what the payment is. So you will see, especially in the Aged Open Payables report, that you'll see all the entries of the invoice amount and the payments are all in USD. You don't see the dinar values. So the balance of the invoice shows now $750 remaining to pay on the invoice. $250 has been paid on the invoice, although the payment was in dinars. And we now want to process a payment for the balance of the invoice, but we want to pay this amount in USD. So we go back to generate cash requirements, and it's run as before. Since the invoice is defined in USD to be paid in dinars, this combination must be used to select the invoice. So only invoices that are defined as USD to be paid in DNR are available for selection. And in this case, it finds our one invoice for $750 that is left to pay. If we look at the cash requirements file, it shows the remaining balance in USD and dinar. So remaining is $750 in US, and the pay amount in dinars is 1,125 at an exchange rate of 1.5. However, we want to make this payment in USD and not dinars. So in the grid, we can change the payment currency to USD, which is equal to the invoice currency. The rate is automatically set to 1, and the payment amount then becomes equal to the remaining invoice amount. So the remaining invoice amount was $750. The rate is changed to 1, and so the pay amount in the payment currency is $750. And you can see that the balances in the lower section of the screen all match what was done in the grid. In the automated check processing screen, we would select USD for both the currency and the payment currency selections. As before, the bank code selections are dictated by the payment currency selection. So now that the payment currency is US, then the bank code options are for only US bank accounts. The check is printed with the balance in the payment in US, and the invoice is satisfied. You can see that it's $750, and the check stub information shows again the $1,000 was the original invoice amount, and $750 was the payment amount. When we void checks, we would choose the entity, the invoice currency, and the vendor ID. And then we would choose the bank code related to the currency to void the check. And we'd select a check to void from the list based on the bank code. So in the first screen, we see that we have chosen a USD account. And the check that is displayed is the one that we wrote in US for this invoice. And on the screen to the right, you can see that we've chosen dinar's bank code, and the dinar invoices that were paid by that show up as the part of the check that we wrote for dinars. So to process manual checks, we would select the invoice and currency payment currency. Again, we would use USD and dinar to select the invoices that are defined that way. Again, the bank code selections are still dependent on the payment currency selected. And we would enter the check amount in the invoice currency. So in this case, it is in the currency of USD. And you can see we're making a partial payment of $250 for this payment. The check amount we expect to be $250. We've chosen the invoice, and by default, the invoice will come in at the full amount of $1,000, and with the exchange rate that was registered with the invoice of 1.5, so the currency payment amount is $1,500. So since we are only paying $250 as a partial payment dinars, we want to change the amount to pay to $250 in the grid. Again, you can change the rate to a different rate. Here we put 1.25, and the currency payment amount, the payment check amount, and the net paid amounts are all changed to the new calculation of 313. When we save the check, the manual check listing displays the amount paid in USD and in dinars. So we can see amount paid of $250 in US, and the actual check was recorded as 313 in dinars. To pay the balance of the invoice in USD, we first load the invoices as usual. So currency is USD, the payment currency is DNR. The bank code again is related to the payment currency, so we get a dinar bank code. And we've selected the invoice, and you can see that the amount due for that invoice is $750 with the default rate of 1.5 and the current currency payment amount of 1,125 dinars. Now we'll click the Override Payment Currency checkbox. This will change the exchange rate to 1 and calculate the currency payment amount to be equal to the amount paid value. It will also recalculate the totals at the bottom of the screen. And additionally, the bank code field will be cleared, allowing you to select a USD bank code for payment. If there are multiple invoices that are being paid by this check, then all of the invoices will be set to a rate of 1 that would match then the invoice amount in USD, and everything would be paid as USD. And now the manual check listing report shows the payment in USD. The amount paid is always in US dollars on this report, since the invoice and the payment were both in US. In summary, invoices can be entered in one currency and paid in another currency. The exchange rate can be changed at the point of the payment. Partial amounts can be paid in one currency and the balance in the source invoice currency. The only currencies available for payment are the currencies registered with the invoice. And this functionality is available for both automated checks and manual checks.